We are exceptionally delighted today to have with us one of the leading researchers in the UK and his co-author, who are talking about an exceptionally interesting, topic. Um, and it has something to do with the corporate governance, but infused into, socioeconomics of waste disruption and CO removal, and the case of the Cyrus Mistry dismissal from Tata Sons. So you have a very important case study that was undertaken by two leading researchers who are able to share some of the interesting ideas with us, interesting findings, and the implications. So it gives me a great pleasure to introduce the authors of this great paper. I will start by introducing Silvia Gaia, who is a reader in accounting at Essex Business School. She's here with us. She previously worked as a lecturer in accounting at the University of Cagliari in Italy, and has held visiting positions at the University of Birmingham, HEC Montreal in Canada, and Columbia Business School in the US. She's done a great research and contributed immensely to social and environmental accounting and reporting, and also issues of corporate governance that are covered here in this paper, and published this in a highly reputed academic journals in our profession. And she's currently, active as chair of the special interest group of the British Accounting and Finance Association, BFA, on social accounting and reporting, and is editorial board of a number of journals, including the Journal of Accounting in Emerging Economies, and also reviewers of some internationally recognized journals. And secondly, the co-author is a great friend of our Center for Global Finance, and indeed a collaborator in many projects we have here in the center. And I'm talking here about Professor Thankom Arun, who many of you have met in person, know very well. His international or global name recognition status, currently as Professor of Global Development and Accountability at Essex Business School. He's also Professor Extraordinaire in the Stellenbosch Business School in South Africa, and also Research Fellow at IZA in Bonn. He's also chairing an academic steering group on financial inclusion within the International Cooperative and Mutual Insurance Federation, ICMIF. He's also a fellow of very distinguished societies and organizations globally, a fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences, and a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. And previously has been professor and director of the Institute for Global Finance, closer to the Center for Global Finance now, and at the Lancashire Business School, and visiting professor at the University of Rome, and with previous academic positions at Manchester and Ulster, during which time Arun and I worked jointly and productively in the past. His research has covered many areas of corporate governance and also on development, but always with the multidisciplinary, learning learning process to understand global challenges, particularly in a developing and emerging country context. Arun is now leading a global research project funded by the ESRC in the area of fintech and financial inclusion, also also other projects on climate change and sustainability. I could go on forever about the great work that Arun and co-author have done. But let me just save the time and say, give Arun the opportunity to start presenting the work. I understand this is a two-person drama, so Arun will be talking some of the time, and Silvia will also join the presentation. Meanwhile, for housekeeping purposes, let me say, please mute your microphone and also post your comments and feedback in the chat room. But of course, if you feel that you need to put across your point, feel free to put up your hand and I will interrupt the presentation, and so you can put in your view as we go. Otherwise, we'll have a full discussion at the end of the presentation. Arun, it's a great pleasure to have you on board today. Please go ahead and start your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Victor, for those kind words. I think it is always a great honor to come back to you for intellectual discussions and also participations in various projects. So the admiration is mutual, I need to say. I think thank you very much for all the support these years. But beyond that, I need to say Center for Global Finance. I have attended few of the events in the past. It has been doing a very great service to the academia in terms of presenting diverse themes and which are close to and which resonates the policy and research quite well. So thank you for leading this kind of event. Okay, and regarding today's presentation, this is a joint presentation by Silvia. Silvia is there. Silvia, Gaia, and me. We both are from University of Essex. I think I need to start with a story that actually we have been working on this paper on and off for the last 4 years in different contexts. We visited Mumbai, visited few people there, but then so many things happened. It's a quite evolutionary. It's just like a unfolding a flower. But here it took 4 years, that's all. But it took 4 years, but finally last week when we were discussing about this output, we are reasonably confident that we can move ahead with this work. And this is a theoretical analysis of a particular case of India's corporate heritage. I deliberately use the word heritage because this particular company, which we are talking, that is Tata Group in general and Tata Sons, which is the main main holding company of a large number of Tata companies and Tata Sons. And they have a history of a very long and cherished history. So we'll come to that in a minute. And what is the context here? The context is we have seen many incidents where the CEO's been fired, and we remember the incident in 2020 in McDonald's case, and where the firing happened because of some unethical behavior to a colleague. And in many cases, the firing is mainly due to the financial underperformance. And we always say the CEO's been fired because of the performance of this quarter was not good or last 3 years was not good, something like that. But here, the context is slightly different, and slightly different in the sense it actually very much linked to the history of the firm, the legacy of the firm, and that is why we got interested. This is something very unique in the corporate world. And what we are doing here is we are using a theory which actually fits with our case very well, and particularly with the family firms. But I need to say that when we say a family firm, although the Tata carries the name of a group known as Tata, but it's not a pure family firm in its strictest sense, because it always go out of the family if necessary, to select the best talent to lead the company. And it happened many times, and you will listen to that in the course of our presentation. But our issue is about the dismissal of a CEO, and CEO be only for 4 years, and from the chairmanship of the Tata Group. And why is it that, and what prompts that kind of a dismissal, and to what extent the dismissal relates to the socio-emotional wealth, or how to what extent that concept can actually explain this particular incident is our motto here. Silvia, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the Tata Group, it started as a trading company in 1868. So you can see, you can count the number of years, a very long history there is visible. And currently it has a revenue of 128 billion US dollars, and it employed about 935,000 employees, and it has presence in more than 100 countries in 6 continents. So it is a Indian conglomerate, but a global one. And that's the first thing we need to say, that we are not talking about a family firm restricted to a particular area or a particular region. It's not like that. It's one of the very big conglomerates we are discussing about it. The photo which you see on the left side, that is their headquarters, is widely known as Bombay House, and they have recently refurbished it, but still that building is about the same age as the Tata Group. And when we look into their corporate journey, they always maintained a global vision. Global vision in the sense they even started an office in London in 1907. Just imagine at that time, an Indian company going through some transformational stage, but decided that we need to have an office in London at that time, to reach out to the other countries and globally our operations. So that was their vision. That kind of an unparalleled corporate journey makes the company as very unique. And their mission is very different, because nowadays we are talking about more stakeholders and more interested. But normally the firms always believed quite well in the performance of the firm and the shareholders' interest. At that point of time, the company had a mission, and they continued with that mission until today, to improve the quality of life of communities whom they serve globally through long-term stakeholder value creation based on leadership with trust. So there are so many terminologies in that mission. If you look closely, you can see that the communities is very important, and it's quite difficult to head from a business enterprise at that point of time, and they maintained it over all these years, and they serve globally. The community is not mainly about communities in India or where their headquarters is placed, but wherever they do the business, they need to look at this. This is before the CSR period. So remember this, the timing is very important. This is before the CSR period, and they always maintain a long-term stakeholder value creation. So their stakeholders are, once you are a Tata employee, then you are always been a Tata employee, because they maintain that kind of a the links and trust with employees and stakeholders. That's important. And also, there are many instances where, when we visited Pune for our data collection, we noticed that there is a leadership with trust. Everyone is a leader. Everyone in the company is a leader. They have an allocated responsibility, and they are being responsible for a particular task, and they feel that kind of responsibility, and then they use that kind of a responsibility. That's very, very unusual in the corporate world. And here you can see that from top to bottom, that kind of a leadership with trust. So if you entrust a particular task to an employee, then it's 100% guaranteed that he or she will deliver that job, but in its perfect sense. And so the mission is not a statement for Tatas, and mission is a value embodied through the entire stakeholders and also transformed and passed through the various generations. And that made the case very unique. Silvia, please. Yes. So at one point of time, there was a saying that the Tata produces from salt to software. That is true. They had about 200 and more than 240 companies in their list. But during the Ratan Tata's time, Ratan Tata, one of the celebrated CEOs of Tata and a main player of this story, and he took Tata's. He was in the leadership for around more than 20 odd years. But what he had done at that point was amalgamate these 240 companies into about 10 or so vertical companies. So there are some sort of these vertical streams are there. And that was quite good to see that what are the areas where they work right now. And they also own a large number of popular brands in India and outside. And from UK perspective, we can see Land Rover, Jaguar, and Tetley is there, the famous Tetley. But all these are through the acquisitions, and they always use the mergers and acquisition strategy quite actively in terms of promoting and expanding their operations around the world. Um, Moving on, they believe in, they have certain core values, and these 5 core values actually constitute the company quite strongly. And they are one is integrity, responsibility, excellence, pioneering, unity. And these 5 are actually quite central to the Tata's operations. And since its inception, if you go through the archival document, you see that since its inception, all these 5 points were actually placed in different contexts at that point of time. Then in the modern era, during the Ratan's period, in mid-90s, they introduced that into a code of conduct, the Tata Code of Conduct. Now that is a bedrock on which they base their individual and leadership commitments and relate it to the Tata values. So the Tata values are actually determined by integrity, responsibility, excellence, pioneering, and unity. So if you go back, you can see that earlier I mentioned about they maintain long-term relationship with their stakeholders. I can give you an example here because during the COVID and many of the Tata employees, they got COVID and passed away. And what Tata promised at that time was paying deceased employees salaries, housing, and medical benefits until what would have been their retirement at the age of 60, and then pledged to cover the education cost of their children till their graduation. So that's a very big step by a corporate company. And they actually stick to the word. They don't need to wait for the beneficiaries no need to wait for these sort of allowances. It will come to their house on the first day of the month by a Tata employee. So they don't need to go to the bank or something. So Tata representatives will go to the house, hand over the money on the first day, and with a note from Tata's. So this kind of a personification of these services, I think that made Tata very unique, and every employee feels that we are part of the Tata. So these are some of the values Tata actually cultivated over the period of time. Um, yes. So in terms of ownership, it is quite interesting because Tata Sons actually owns almost all of the Tata companies. So Tata Sons is not a listed one, it's a holding company, but all the other companies are listed. There are many listed companies, about 29 or so, but there are some unlisted companies as well. Nearly 60 of them are unlisted as well. But if you look into the shareholding pattern of Tata Sons, who is the key player here, You can see that only one single individual shareholder here, and that is Mistry's family. That's Cyrus Mistry, the another actor of this drama, Cyrus Mistry, who was the CEO from 2012 to 2016. So his family, this is basically a construction group, but they owned 18.4% of the Tata shares over three instances in the history. And first time in around 1950s and 60s and 70s. So finally they occurred. I think the last one was in 1975. So they own 18.4% of Tata shares, mainly purchasing from the Tata family members. But 66% of the money actually Tata's from that's mainly from shares or mainly from Tata Trust. When I say Tata Trust, these trusts are actually quite heavily engaged in charitable activities. The two major trusts are Dadabhai Navroji Trust and Ratan Tata Trust. But there are many other trusts for education, health, and many. And Tata even sponsored and put quite a lot of money into the first Indian Institute of Science, now a world leading science institute. And similarly, they have invested in the atomic space research, and they also invested in the health facilities, particularly for cancer treatment. So Tata Trust are actually do all these charitable activities there. So that means they can't take the profit for, they can claim their expenses, but they can't take the profit to their own personal account. So all the profits will go back to all the shareholders. Now you can see that it will, the 66% that will go back to Tata Trust, and that will be reinvested in the society in different forms. So I think this is something very, and this is very different from CSR. CSR is for the Tata Sons as a whole, and this is, I'm talking about the profit and distribution of profits among the shareholders. So that is something very different. So just think about this pattern. This pattern is very important. A single major shareholder, that is Mistry family with 18.4%, but the largest shareholders, a group of Tata Trust, and all the Tata Trust, it has Tata members there, but at the same time, it also has public figures there. So and they do some kind of a public generation of public goods. And that's the ultimate objective of Tata Trust. And this is the shareholding pattern of this company over the last 150 plus years. And then the left side, you can see the structure little more detailed, where the Tata Sons holds many holding company, many other companies. And many of those companies are listed companies, so they operate it, and the Tata Sons has a share on that one, and that share will help them to run the show. So that's the way it's being organized. Um, yeah. So now, if you look at these three figures are very crucial, and we are talking about all the three figures now. The left side, the first one, that's one of the founders, the statue. The statue is one of the founders of the Tata Sons. I think that it must be Dada Bhai, this one. I'm not, yeah. And the second, we are talking about those live pictures. The first one, Ratan Tata, who was the chairperson from 91 to 2012, and then he came back again for a year, 2016 to 17. Ratan was perfectly healthy at the time of his retirement announcement, but he decides that no one should continue after 70 or something. So that's why he stopped his service at 2012 and said, I'm going to search for a new CEO. And the next one, the Cyrus Mistry. Cyrus Mistry belongs to that single largest shareholder group, Mistry family. And he was the chairperson for 2012 to 2016. And then after that, after 2016, Tata came back, Ratan Tata came back for a year. And then one of their most successful subsidiaries, known as TCS, Tata Consultancy Services. The CEO of Tata Consultancy Services, Nadarajan Chandrasekharan, he was selected as the chairperson in 2017 to lead Tata. I need to emphasize this fact. Nadarajan Chandrasekhar Chandrasekharan does not belong to any of the Tata families, and he is from entire different region. He is from Tamil Nadu, that's from the South India, and Tatas are generally is a Parsi family, is attached with the family. So it's entirely different. There is no family connection there. But Natarajan Chandrasekharan is a professional, and he proved his knowledge and worth through taking Tata consultancy service to new heights. And he is leading the company at the moment. And altogether, there were only six chairpersons. So that's the story. And it took about 14 months for the Tata Group to announce Cyrus Mistry as the new chairperson in 2012. And you can read from the slides that Ratan Tata was praising Cyrus Mistry and his eulogy. You can read it there. But Cyrus Mistry was not a new person because before that, as a nominee of the Mistry family, he was on the board. He was on the Tata Sons board for 6 years. So they knew him very well. But they did an international search, the global search. They looked for people from even from the West as well. And finally, they decided, okay, this is the guy for us. And the board has decided about Cyrus Mistry and that person. And as you can see from Tata's quote, he is intelligent and qualified to take on the responsibility being offered and like that. So it was all happy moment at that time. And Tata, read again, Tata said, I will be committed to working with him over the next year to give him the exposure, involvement, etc., etc. So all praise and very positive and happy days. Silvia, please, next one. Yeah. But in October 2016, they dismissed the Tata board. Suddenly, one day in a board meeting, without notice, they dismissed Cyrus Mistry, and that meeting was chaired by Ratan Tata, the former chairperson, Ratan Tata. And that is quite interesting because in the corporate history and or the principles of good governance, there are some protocols we need to follow to oust a CEO. But here, all this happened at sudden, without further notice. And then, obviously, the questions are raised about the rights of minority shareholders. It's very important, and we are actually looking into some of these issues in the paper, later part of the paper. So the core question here is, what led to the ouster of Mistry in the 4 years? So you can say it's a failure of the board as well, because a CEO ouster is always related to the performance of a decision taken by the board, and they have to revisit it. So it's something you can pass the blame little bit to the board as well. But that's the core question is what led to the ouster of Mistry in those 4 years. And we analyze this through the lenses of socio-economic wealth theory. So next, we will introduce socio-economic wealth theory and then the main features or the major dimensions of socio-economic wealth theory and to what extent that sort of a framework support or analyze the case of Cyrus Mistry in that sense. Silvia, please.
Thanks, Arun. Sorry, 1 second, I cannot move myself. Oh yeah, now I can. So thanks, Arun, for introducing the case study. I will now take over and explain a little bit of the theoretical lenses that we're using to explain the case study and the methodological part and what we think are our main findings based on this case. So we relied on socio-emotional wealth theory, which is a pretty new theory because it was developed by Gomez Mejia in 2000, in the early 2000s. So it's a 20 years old theory. And this theory has been developed specifically to explain how family businesses work. And particularly the main focus of this theory is the fact that in family businesses, financial performance are not the key aim of a firm, but they aim to create and preserve something called socio-emotional wealth. With the social-emotional wealth being defined as the stock of affect-related value that the family has invested in the firm and derives from the firm. So what the theory states is that in family businesses, financial performance are just the means to achieve social-emotional wealth, and strategic decisions are not put in place or taken based on profitability or financial performance, but they are rather taken in a way that would allow the business to preserve this stock of emotion and affect-related values that the family get directly from the business. Important is also to outline that according to the theory, the only situation in which the family would put financial performance at a priority level, it is when the lack of achieving this financial performance would put in danger the firm's survival and therefore the ability of keep generating this social-emotional wealth. So the theory has been widely used in the last 20 years, and in 2012, Barone et al. Have further developed the theory and tried to identify 5 dimensions in which this socio-emotional wealth might be present and might manifest in a business. So these are called the fiber dimensions, which and each of the letters of the fiber scale indicates one dimension. So the first dimension is the F dimension, standing for family control and influence, and this is considered to be one of the key dimension and the key element of social-emotional wealth, because without the family being able to control and influence the business, the family will not be able to get any social-emotional wealth, because without controlling and influence and without being the body taking the decision that can preserve the social-emotional wealth might be lost. The second dimension relates to the identification of the family to the business and refer to those emotional value that the family obtain from a sense of identification with what the business is doing. And this basically relates to the fact that the business is seen as an extension of the family, and therefore a family is identified with the business when what the business does reflect the values and of the family that runs it. And previous studies have shown that this sense of identification tend to be stronger when the business carry the same name as the family, because of course there is an issue of association also in the public, and therefore the family will feel to be more identified. The third dimension is a dimension which we believe is particularly very important in the case of Tata in particular, because of what Arun explained before. The Tata Group is not just a traditional family with the blood-related member of the family being involved in running the business, but Tata is more a family that represents a community, with every member of the business being part of this enlarged type of family. So in this case, the B dimension stays for the importance of creating strong social ties, to binding social ties, and this relates to the fact that every family business, if you've seen the literature, you can see that the role that employees and other stakeholders have in family business tend to be more core than in more public and widespread ownership business, because of this sense of community and relationship that are created between the family and the employees, the supplier, the customer, with a sense of becoming a sort of enlarged families. So a sort of wealth that the family gets from the business is to preserve and create good relationship with the society in which they operate. So therefore, it's important for them to preserve and have good relationship with their employees, with their supplier, with the community, and so on. The third dimension is the emotional dimension itself, which is sort of the more irrational a little bit, because it's the one that relates to those sort of emotion that people get from a sense of attachment to things. I think all of us might have a sense of attachment even with objects that remind us of something, and it's the same thing of a family with its business. There are some part of the business in which they might feel more emotionally attached because they might remind the family of some particular experience that happened, and therefore it exists a sort of more emotional attachment to some part or of the business. And the last part, the last dimension is the R, and this, according to the theory, refers to the renewal of the family bonds by transferring the business to the future generations. So this basically refers to the ability of preserving what the family is creating and transferring what are the value and the legacy of the family business in the future, so that somebody else can continue this legacy in the future. What is important to stress out in here is that in the strict interpretation of this dimension, the main focus is to transfer these family business within the family members, so those that are blood related with the family that's founded it. But we believe, and you will see in the case of Tata, that this interpretation can be broader and can be considered not necessarily with transferring the family business within the family, but making the family business to last in order that the legacy that's been created will be continued by people that are part of the same community and they share the same value. So this is an overall view of the 5 dimensions, and this has been studied. I mean, the paper of Verona is a theoretical paper, but later on, some papers have started trying to investigate this dimension empirically in using some large sample of companies. And for instance, the paper of Hock in 2016 tested this scale using Austrian and German family firms and find support only for 3 of the 5 dimensions: the renewal of family bonds, the emotional attachment of family members, and the identification of the family members within the firm. Similar results are found by the more recent study of Filser et al. In Finland and Gomez Mejia and Herrero in Spain. A more recent study of Gerken et al. Tested the fiber scale using a more international sample, which includes Asian, European, and North American companies, and support the evidence of the previous studies, but added also evidence for the dimension of binding social ties. So strangely enough, they didn't find support for the dimension that is considered to be the core for having socio-emotional wealth, which is the control, the F dimension. If you read the literature on the fiber scale and the socio-emotional theory, what has been argued is that more studies are needed to test this scale and see its validity, but in particular, more work is needed to understand how these dimensions affect each other. And that's why and where we are trying to contribute with this paper. Particularly more recently, a theoretical paper has been published that tries to elaborate theoretically this association that can exist between these 5 dimensions. And in particular, the paper of Schwab et al. In 2020 distinguished these 5 dimensions using an ability and willingness framework. So basically, according to the paper, there are dimensions that do not represent socio-emotional wealth, but represent the ability to produce it, while there are other dimensions that represent the willingness to have this social emotional wealth. And in particular, they distinguish, they identify the dimension of the control and the renewal of the family legacy as an ability dimension. It does not represent socio-emotional wealth, but they are necessary for socio-emotional wealth to be in place. Why? Because if the family does not control and influence the business, is not leading the company, so is not making and taking the company to the direction that is needed to preserve and create socio-emotional wealth. At the same time, if the family legacy is not maintained, but if the family legacy is destroyed, this means that the family values are not maintained. And again, this does not allow the creation of social emotional wealth. So these two conditions do not represent social emotional wealth themselves, but represent conditions necessary for creating social emotional wealth. While the other three conditions, the identification of the family business, the binding of social ties, and the emotional part, as you can see, those are the more socio-emotional related, because these are those that represent these attachment, these the values of the firm, and this sense of identification, which are all type of sort of sentiment. And according to this framework, these are the willingness. So these represent the real socio-emotional wealth. And therefore, to have socio-emotional wealth, we need two necessary conditions. So we need to have control, and we need to preserve the family legacy. And then as soon one of the identification, the social bonds or the emotional aspect is present, then we have social emotional wealth. So this evolution of the fiber scale start of putting a sort of relationship of the 5 dimension. So what we're planning to do in this paper is to start with this ability and willingness framework to explain the case of mystery dismissal, and use the case of mystery dismissal to further elaborate how these 5 dimensions might associate and interact to each other. So and in particular, our main research question is first to identify what are the reasons that led to Cyrus Mistry dismissal. So what are the possible reasons that can explain why he was dismissed, and can these reasons be explained using the fiber scale, and how can we use this case study to further elaborate the SWOB et al. Ability and willingness model created in relation to this dimension. So to do this, we, of course, used a case study methodological approach, and we relied on different sources of data. So the main source of data that we used is archival, but we also support these archival sources using some face-to-face interviews. So why we did rely mostly with archival data? We did rely mostly with archival data because this is a very important case study, and accessing the people involved in this fight for the leadership of Tata was not possible, because these are very visible and well-known actors. So instead of accessing these people directly, and the people that know the facts directly, we access them in an indirect way by using the newspaper articles that have discussed the Cyrus Mistry dismissal, and that have interviewed people that are the Cyrus Mistry or Ratan Tata themselves. So we could have access of their view of the case via these newspaper articles, or other key actors like employees or previous or current members of the board of directors of the Tata companies that can provide a well-informed view of the facts. We select the newspaper by focusing on the 4 top Indian newspapers that were ranked in terms of number of copies sold. And we also integrate them with 2 leading international newspapers, again, by number of copies sold, which are the Financial Times and the Wall Street journals. We focused on the newspaper articles published from the date of Mistry dismissal up to till 1 year after, and we stopped after 1 year because we don't have the graph here, but you could see that the number of articles published is very high in the first couple of months, but then slowly started declining. We search this article using 2 simple keywords. We search for any article that included the name of Cyrus Mistry and any article that included the name of Ratan Tata. Of course, this led to a number of articles that were not relevant. So we searched and screened all of them and retained only those that were discussing about the dismissal of Cyrus Mistry. We do not rely just on the newspaper article, but we integrate the information collected by using more official sources, which are the press statements published by Tata Sons after the dismissal of Cyrus Mistry, and also all the information that was available in the website that Cyrus Mistry created after the dismissal happened. This is important to give you a bit of background of this, because the dismissal was not easy. I mean, it's not that Mistry was dismissal and that was it. Mistry fought a lot to stay in the group and to maintain the control of some of the corporation. And then he set up this website that it was called Cyrus for Governance, which is now, I think, is closed, it's not active anymore, to obtain the support of the minority shareholders of the other companies of the group. And what happened is that his dismissal in all the other part of the group was subject to a vote. So he used this website to provide his reason, his view about his dismissal, and to try to stay in the business and maintaining the control. So we believe that this was a very important source of information, because provided the direct opinion of the CEO that was dismissed. In addition, we also traveled to India a couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago, in 2018, and we conducted interviews with some key members that we were able to access, which include some member of the board of directors of some of the Tata companies, employees that working for the Tata Group, but also members of Indian governmental organization and business professors that were informed about the case. We conduct semi-structured interview because this allowed us to explore a little bit more giving the flexibility to obtain to deep a little bit more from the answer we were receiving from the people interviewed. And the aim of these interviews were to understand the reasons behind Cyrus Mistry dismissal. So that's how we guided the interview. In terms of research approach, we followed mostly a qualitative research approach based on the interpretivist epistemological assumptions, and in particular, we used a research method that is called abduction. What is abduction? Abduction is a research method that combines deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. Why did we do this? Because we couldn't use a completely inductive approach because we have the theory that we wanted to use to explain Cyrus Mistry dismissal, but we could not use a completely deductive approach because we had to explore the data to see if the theory, to see how the case of the dismissal was happened. So this abductive research approach basically allows to go back and forth between the theoretical body of knowledge and the empirical part. So in analyzing the data, we went back and forward for the case of Mr. Dismissal to identify the reasons behind his dismissal, and the theory to link these reasons to the fiber dimension and the socio-emotional theory. So we thought that this was the perfect type of methodology to use in this study. So I can now start talking a little bit more of our findings. So what we have done, we have first read all these articles and try to identify in the newspaper articles, in the press statements released by Tata, in the website of Cyrus Mistry, and also in the transcription of the interviews we made, we try to identify the reasons that were used to explain Mistry dismissal. Surprisingly, there was no talk about financial performance. That was Arun indicated before. When we talk about large listed companies, usually financial performance, is behind the dismissal of the CEO. In the case of Cyrus Mistry, we identified two main leading arguments. The first was related to Mistry attempt to change the corporate governance structure of the Tata Group in an attempt to take control of the group and create distance between the Tata Trust and the Tata companies. And the second type of arguments were mostly related to the managerial style adopted by Cyrus Mistry, which was more, let's say, Western and shareholder financial profitability oriented, and less in line with what are the values of the group and the Tata family. So in our reading of these articles, interviews, and so on, the managerial style adopted by Mistry was conflicting with what are the values of the Tata family. And there are 5 particular instances of projects and cases that Mistry managed that were against the value and were created sort of conflict with the value of the group. So instead of going and analyzing these and explaining these basically 6 instances directly, what we will do, I will just first show how we have classified these main reasons in line with the fiber scale, and I will explain each of these cases by linking them with a fiber scale. So as shown, this picture shown, we have found sort of direct link between these 6 instances that were repeatedly discussed in the newspaper and press releases and interviews with 3 dimensions of the fiber scale: the F dimension, the B dimension, and the E dimension. We did not find a direct discussion related to the I and R dimension, but we believe that indirectly these dimensions are also present in these instances. And when I will explain now these cases one by one and explain how they are linked to this dimension. So starting with the family, the F dimension. The F dimension, as I said, refers to the control and influence. So it refers to the importance of control and influence the business. And we believe that there is strong evidence in the case of Mistry dismissal that the reason of is dismissal related to the fact that Mistry was acting to reduce how the family control and influence the business. And this is reflected by the Mistry efforts of changing the governance structure and by the empirical evidence of the Tata Power Wellspun deal. So in terms of governance structure, if you see the newspaper, the press releases and the website of Cyrus Mistry, you will see that the main issue that characterized the 4 years of Mistry leadership was that he did not have full control as a CEO. Even if he was the chairman and the CEO of the Tata Sons, he did not have the power to take the major decision. But in several statements, there were highlights, complaints by Cyrus Mistry of the fact that he needed to get approval from the Tata Trust or from Ratan Tata himself to take any kind of decision. This was, according to Mistry, something that cannot characterize a large group of companies in which most of them are also listed in the public market, and therefore Mistry was attempting to create a new sort of governance structure that was trying to reduce the control and influence that the trust had on the group. And indeed, we found several evidence of, even in the news articles, supporting this attempt. On the other side, from the Tata Trust perspective, this attempt was not perceived in a positive way because the trust is the one that controls the group with 66% of the share. So for Ratan Tata and the trust, it was unacceptable that Mistry was trying to remove the influence that they have on the business. Indeed, an example that is mentioned in several times is the so-called Tata Power Wellspoon deal. So what happened is that Mistry acquired the Wellspoon renewable energy company without getting the official approval of Tata Sons before doing it. He already presented a proposal after the agreement was already taken. And this is something that, according to the word of Ratan Tata, go completely against the values. Indeed, he stated, while all important decisions, particularly those that involved acquisition or fundraising, were earlier always discussed and approved by the trust representatives on Tata Sons board, the Tata Trust now found themselves marginalized. So this clearly show that what Mistry was doing was to reduce the influence and the control of the group. And indeed, this was also something that Mistry tried to do even after having losing his position, fighting to maintain the control in some other companies. Interesting, this dimension is also the one that is clearly discussed in our interviews, and in particular, one of the board members that we interviewed also provides another interesting picture of the story, which fits in line with the control dimension. According to this board member, what happened is that the 66% of the shares that the Tata Trust own are owned via trust, but most of these are preferential shares. So these preferential shares usually have dividend rights, but they usually do not have voting rights. However, because of an exemption that is granted by the Indian government to the Tata Trust has also the power to vote. So there were rumors at the time in which Mistry was dismissed that he was trying to get the exemption not renewed. This, you understand what would mean the trust not having any voting power. And since the Mistry family owned 18% of the voting shares, this would mean Cyrus to become the new basically owner of the Tata Group, and the new and the group would pass from Tata to the Mistry family. So you can see as the F dimension in this case is key, because it does play an important role. And this is something I want to stress also for our conclusion we will make later. This is key in line with the SWOB framework, because if the Tata group of the Tata family is not able to influence the decisions, then there is no socio-emotional wealth, because all the other dimensions cannot be generated. If there is no control, there is no ability, there is no anymore any legacy, because the legacy will be affected by the decision of who is controlling the business. There is no attachment, because if who is controlling the business is taking decision that conflicts with the values of the family, the attachment is gone, as it can be gone the emotional attachment to the business, and also can be gone all the social relationship that the family has with stakeholder of the business. So this is, in our view, as the bottom of the fiber scale, and also as the prominence that is given in the newspaper of this dimension show, this is the key aspect that explain the Mistry dismissal. However, we also find evidence of the other dimension, in particular the B dimension, we think is the second in terms of relevance that is emerged from the discussion of in the newspaper and from interviews. And this is again related to the group we're studying that gives so much importance to the community in which it operates. Two cases are particularly important to show the importance of this dimension. In particular, the first one relates to how Mistry dealt with the Docomo controversy. So let me give you some background. So Docomo is an Asian company which from Japan, which at the end of the 2000s bought 26.5% of Tata Teleservice. And this purchase was made under some specific condition. If Tata Teleservice fails to meet some specific performance criteria, Docomo has the right to sell back the shares bought at a fixed price, which was to Tata, which was half of the money they spent to buy them, unless Tata could find a buyer willing to buy the shares at the market value. 5 years later, under Mistry chairmanship, Tata Teleservice failed to meet this performance target, and Docomo announced the intention to exit. However, Tata Sons could not find a buyer, therefore offered to buy the shares back as agreed. What happened is that the internal regulation in India changed, and foreigners, companies, for investors were not allowed anymore to to sell shares of Indian business at a fixed price, but they must sell them at a fair value. So the Bank of India stopped the agreement, and therefore Docomo would have to settle for a lower price. Now, what is the issue in here? The issue in here is that an important thing for the values of Tata is that Tata do not go back on the word given. Tata is famous for being an honorable group, an honorable partner, and somebody that maintains the word given. So what Cyrus Mistry should have done in this case, and several articles highlight that Ratan Tata was not very happy in the way he handled this controversy, because instead of trying his best to have the offer approved, he's basically probably thought more as a business manager and thought to save money to the business and avoid paying that money. Which was not at the end successful strategy, because Docomo initiated an arbitration in London and Tata was forced to pay. But the issue in here is that Ratan Tata would not have allowed the arbitration to start, and would not have allowed the name of Tata to be mentioned and to be considered as the name of a partner that does not maintain the word given. So in this case, how Mistry managed the case was destroying the creation of these social bonds with the community, and was ruining the name of the business. Similarly, we can interpret with the social bond also the Tata Steel case. And again, here I need to give you some background. Tata Steel acquired in 27 the UK company Chorus under Tata leadership, which allowed Tata to become the 5th largest producer of steel in the world. Over the time, however, the company that Chorus, that was after renamed Tata Steel Europe, was not very profitable, and during Cyrus Mistry, he was decided to exit the business and sell it. This was not seen very well by Tata. indeed, as you can see in one of the comments they made when they explain the reason of Mistry dismissal, they say some investment have been hugely successful, while others, mentioning Tata Steel Europe, have taken time to be profitable. Our approach has been to support and fund this business during their development and growth phases. We exit the business only when we believe it is unviable. So the group did not believe that Mistry has done enough to stay in the business. And the main issue that, as Arun said before, is that employees are seen as part of the Tata family, and exiting the chorus Tata Steel Europe would mean putting at risk thousands of jobs, and therefore again going and destroying those social ties that Tata is so proud about. So again, we can see another explanation of how the conduct of Mistry was more profit related, while Tata would prefer to have an approach that tends to maintain the good relationship and satisfy not just the shareholder, but also the stakeholders. The last two cases reflect more an emotional area. In particular, these refer to the Air Asia and to the Nano project. And here again is how Mistry was kind of acting going in a way that was destroying a bit this emotional attachment of the family. And particularly, if you all remember the Nano car, it was, I think all the newspaper in the world talk in the early 2000 when Tata launched the Nano car, which was the cheapest car produced at the time, and which was done with the aim of allowing families that were not very wealthy to have a safer means of transport rather than a scooter. And Ratan Tata, this was Ratan Tata creation. And as I said before, the emotional dimension is the more irrational one, where we develop attachment to something that they gave us something when we developed them, and we have this sense of attachment with this thing. So what happened is that under Mistry, there were a huge discussion of whether to keep or not the business in the production of Tata, the Nano car open, and at the end, Mistry arrived to the decision to close the production of the car against Tata view. Same another case that can be explained with the emotional dimension is the Air Asia business, where Mistry was completely against entering in this type of business, and also claimed that some mismanagement and were done, and that was done just because Ratan Tata was had passion for airlines and wanted to have airlines in as part of the Tata business. So this gives you a little bit of how the direct connection of the F, B, and E dimension. However, we also believe that indirectly this case also show a sort of identification of the members in a sort of indirect way, in the sense that if we lose the social bonds with our stakeholders, which are part of our core value, as in the case of Tata, of course, the family will also lose a sense of identification, because the conduct of Mistry was changing a little bit the value of the business. If I remove and dismiss businesses in which the family is emotional attachment, having this business removed will also reduce the sense of identification of the business. Or at the same time, acquiring business that perhaps are not in line with the policy of the family, and this will create a less identification of the business. And of course, the main part, if the family is not able to control and influence the business, it's unlikely that there will be a sense of identification. Similarly, we also find that the R dimension is present, however, not present in its core term of passing the business to family members, but we think this dimension is reflected in these 6 instances in terms of family legacy, in terms of preservation of the legacy. All the business, Thankom, Tata Nano, AirAsia, these are legacy of Tata Steel Europe, are legacy of the business, and destroying and removing them would also reduce a little bit the legacy of the family. So just to link now and to wrap up a little bit and link it with the SWOB framework, what are our main conclusions? So based on what we have discussed, we believe that we can have a sort of 4 levels of this fiber dimension, with the family and control to be at the bottom of these dimensions, and the family identification to be at the top. So why is this? We believe that the family and control and influence is the key dimension. This is necessarily, without it, none of the other 4 dimensions can exist. If there is no control, the family legacy will be destroyed because somebody else will shape it in the way they want. If there is no control, the emotional attachment will be lost because somebody else will make decision that will destroy the way we are related to the business. If there is no control, and somebody else is making the decision, the social ties that we have created during the long time of working in the business might be ruined. And if there is no influence, there is also no possibility to be identified. So the family and control is at the bottom of the other dimension. Then we think that in line with the SWOB framework, immediately after, we have the family legacy. And again, because we consider, in line with the SWOB framework, also in the case of Tata, the family control and the renewal of the family legacy to core elements that must be present to create this emotional and socio-emotional value. Why? Because the legacy represents, the preservation of the legacy represents the preservation of the values of the family. So if the legacy is not maintained, then again, we cannot have emotional attachment. If the legacy is not maintained, we cannot keep our social ties and we cannot have any identification. So we think that the case of Mistry dismissal and the way he was acting in terms of controlling influence and in terms of changing a bit the legacy will show that these 2 dimensions are needed to be able to create emotional wealth. What we are extending is that while the SWOB paper does not put this dimension in the same level, we are just saying that the control goes in a more important level, because while we can have control without legacy, we cannot have the legacy if we have no control. So the family and control stays at the bottom. Our evidence also show that the real the socio-emotional part of this wealth really relates to the F, B, and E dimension, to identification, to the social ties, and to the emotional attachment. What we argue, though, is that the emotional attachment and the social ties goes immediately after, and the identification of the firms to the business comes from these values. So why is that? Because we believe that the identification to the business can exist only if there is either an emotional attachment to the business or if there is an attachment to the community. So the identification comes via this value, and that's why we put at the top of the sort of link. What also is important, and I think our case show, is also the association between the renewal of the family legacy and the 3 top dimension. So while for the family and control is only one way, we need the family control to have the other 4, but the family and control can exist without these 4. We believe that in terms of the renewal of the family legacy, this can still be renewed even without identification and without emotional attachment, but the social ties are key to maintain this family legacy. So if we destroy the social ties, we are destroying also the family legacy. So we believe that in this case, the case study analyzed shows that the direction is goes in two ways. If we destroy the reputation of the business, by breaking the social ties, we are also destroying the legacy of the business, and therefore there is kind of circular way between the social ties and the legacy. So that's just skip the 3 slides because just explain what I said without showing them, because I thought it was better to stay focused on the picture, on the scheme. So just to conclude in terms of contribution before leaving Arun to give some final remarks, we believe that these papers is providing important contribution, first in explaining the arguments of the dismissal of a CEO, using arguments that are different from the traditional one based on financial performance. We provide a clear contribution to socio-emotional wealth theory by clearly showing that all the fiber dimensions are present in the case of the Mistry dismissal, so proving validity of these to this scale, and in particular showing as some dimension are present more directly, other dimensions are present in a more indirect way. Also, we believe that our case provides support for the way in which the ability will-length framework is linking the dimension, agreeing that the family control and the renewal are kind of key dimensions that do not indicate social emotional wealth, but are needed to have the social emotional wealth, while the B, E, and I dimensions are those that really represent the emotional and social value for the business. We also believe that by further elaborating the swap model and showing some more link, creating a sort of pyramid of the fiber scale, we provide a new contribution to the model that future people can try to test to see if this can work also in other cases. So I think, Arun, that's gonna be back to you.
Please. Thank you, Silvia. I think that the point about the interconnection between the FIB dimension, and that's a main contribution actually came out of this whole analysis of Tata case. And shall we move to the next one, Silvia? The next slide. Yes. So actually what happened is, this is some kind of an anecdote to the whole story. There is a big difference between Tata and Mistry's approach, because Tata's quote is, a promise is a promise. You can see it on the right side. A promise is a promise is a celebrated quote of Tata. And that is why he went ahead with his nano car project, even if it was a disaster in terms of financial performance. But he decides to go ahead with that because he promised a car at a lower cost for Indian middle class people. So a promise is a promise. So that is his biggest catchword. But we think, as far as Mistry is concerned, business is the promise, and he wants to expand the business and take the control of the business and more focus on the financial performance rather than the social angles of the performance. So that's a big difference between these two approaches. And then what happened was, after the dismissal, Mistry approached National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, and they have actually ruled against Tata and reinstated Cyrus Mistry as the chairman. And in their judgment, they said the proceedings were illegal. It was not given, not organized without giving proper notice, and that sort of issues always lag. But Tata went ahead with the highest court, the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of Tata Sons. And then Cyrus Mistry submitted a review petition following this, and Supreme Court again dismissed that review petition. And finally, the verdict of upholding removal of Cyrus Mistry as head of Tata Sons remains valid. So this happened in 2022 May. And then what happened was that Tata, I think there was some negotiations, and then this Mistry group actually decided to sell their stake in Tata's one. But they asked about 1.75 trillion rupees or something. So the Tatas were offering actually half of it. So the negotiations were going on at this time. And there's an interesting move by Tatas at that point of time to make it into a private limited company. So if you made it into a private limited company, then you cannot sell the shares without the permission of other shareholders. So they haven't moved that, but by initiating the discussions of that sort, they actually pushed Mistry family to a corner, and that is why Mistry family agreed to sell it, because they don't want to continue with that. Meanwhile, their construction business was going in very big financial trouble, and they wanted to put some money back there. So that negotiation is still going on. And in between, I think finally, with a sad moment, yeah, sad part of the story, Silvia, last one, last slide. Cyrus Mistry has died in an accident after his car crashed into a road divider in 2002. 2002 September 4. So he's no more, and his brother is actually leading the group, and things going on. So the history of Cyrus Mistry, and the point is Tata and Cyrus Mistry follows two different streams. Actually, Cyrus Mistry is more UK educated kind of guy, and Tata is more of an US educated kind of guy. But Tata seems to be more socially oriented kind of business approach, and Mistry is more about the business and making the figures right, and without emotion, do the business without emotion. So that was his one of his famous terms and like that. But unfortunately, this thing happened. It's happened. So the story is there. So now, apart from all these anecdotes of this event, our story, our paper highlights about to what extent Tata as a firm and believes in social values, and more considering as a different firm over the years and well known for its professionalism, but what happened to the dismissal of its chief executive within a very short span of time, and we examine the case through the lenses of socio-economic wealth theory. And I think that's the end of our presentation. Thank you, and we are open for further discussions. Thank you.
Yeah, let me give a hand of applause to you, Arun and Silvia, for such a excellent presentation. Um, very clear. It's an interesting story, and that is very much underpinned by a multidisciplinary, theories to explain the behavior of corporate warfare at the top of trying to control the company, and it's absolutely interesting. And to see that even some of the discussions are ongoing, and to actually work out a strand of literature that explains what happens at the top level of organizations among the boards and the CEOs. It's an interesting case study. Throws a lot of insight, could actually even have a basis for reforming the way we look in corporate finance, the shares, share dilution, whereby new shares are offered to and may disadvantage the existing shareholders, corporate control and the market for corporate control, which is at the heart of this. Absolutely interesting. Um, it does appear that even right now, as we speak, there is still, a lot of processes, going on. It's not clear to me what this has implied for the financial health of the business, of the Tata business. whether there's been a casualty in terms of profitability, or even the dividends are being paid. So it's this possible way of actually extending this work into other dimensions, but building on the socio-emotional wellness dimension that I have explored in this work. So very inspirational. And I know we have a number of people here in the audience who do a lot of work in corporate governance, and some who use some different methods like semiotics to get information on a CEO behavior and company behavior. So I guess we're gonna get some discussion. So I can see a hand already going up from my Professor Murinde. Please go ahead and share your discussion.
Thank you so much, Professor, for the opportunity, and Arun and Silvia for the presentation. I have a few aspects that maybe would improve your work. They are not questions per se, but if you feel like answering them, fine, but they could improve your work, which is already very good. It can be excellent. One of them is, how do you think about CEO duality in studies of this nature? Because I have seen so much to do with in UK, then in Tata India. So wouldn't there be some aspect of duality in this kind of study? And how would you deal with it? Then second, you started with a very wonderful story of Tata and how it started and it's moving on. And you led us to a theory. And my thinking was maybe from a case of Tata, the beginning point would be after providing a case, you give us lessons picked from the case study. Then based on those lessons, it's where we best to provide maybe theories that can explain this case study. Ideally, you need to now to lead after the case, we need to see a linkage of the lessons from the case. What lessons do we pick from the case of Tata? Now, those lessons will inform which theory or theories would perhaps be used. That is my thinking, and I think it's very, very important in order to connect. Once those lessons are provided, then they will connect this case to the theory, which you have provided well. But I also want to interest you in another theory, because when Silvia was presenting and when you, Arun, you were concluding, you talked of Tata and the Cyrus Mistry. Tata is more socially oriented, which is okay. Now, when we talk of Tata being socially oriented, when we also see a slide where, as Silvia presented, under the B dimension, the binding social ties, then one would say these are social ties, and maybe another theory of the social capital theory or the social network theory by Granovita would perhaps could have been of importance, especially in the way you have kept on bringing in the social ties. So if we keep looking at the social ties, I think we need to take it beyond the theory you are using and perhaps incorporate the social network theory by Garovita or the social capital theory, so that these social ties can be very well embedded, but emanating from that social capital theory. Those are some of my few questions for now. Let me give others an opportunity. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you, Prof. And maybe we can, let's see whether Silvia or Arun or both want to respond to this.
Yeah, can I go
Yes,
first?
please go ahead, Silvia.
Yeah, just okay. I think they were all valid comments. I really agree with your second comments about, and I mean, it's something we could consider about because we use this abductive approach where we use the theory first to go to the case. But I can see that traditionally you go on the case first and then you use the theory. That's something we could definitely think of, try to shape it in the other way. In relationship to the other two aspects about CO duality and the other theories, can you go give us like more details, like how? I mean, in this case, yeah, there was a case of CEO duality because the chairman was also the CEO. But how would you explore this more? Because I'm not sure how we can use it, since we don't have a term of comparison of a situation where it's been always the case that in the history of Tata, the chairman has been always also the CEO. So there's been always a case of a dual CEO. So we cannot really compare. Even the current chairman is also the CEO.
You want my take?
Yeah.
No, I'm saying, if now in the mystery of the Cyrus Mistry, my issue was, do you think the duality of the CEO, doubling as the chairman and the CEO, could have been perhaps of an impact or could have caused the state under which Tata is operating in? Do you find it logical, empirically proved, and in terms of finance, behavioral finance, we only are recommending? Do you find CEO duality an important factor that we should actually continue really using, or you could be saying CEO duality is not good? There could be some bit of separation of powers in order to guard against some bit of diffusion. So what is your take in that kind of stance?
Okay, so basically you are suggesting to use this case study to basically to provide some contribution in terms of the role of CO duality, right?
Exactly, that's
okay.
it.
Yeah, or even to maybe to make an observation that some of the complications or allegations against Cyrus being able to overrule in many instances behaving differently from the predecessor. Maybe he could get away with it because he was the CEO as well as chair of the board. It may well be the case that if there was separation of those two roles, maybe a CEO would have taken decision and the board would have blocked it, and therefore they would be checking. It's just a kind of observation, but I think whichever, whether it's in a footnote or in the body of the argument, is very one may acknowledge that. Even it could be an acknowledgement to say maybe that's the case, but we don't have enough data or enough to conclude either way. But there is an acknowledgement that that's a consideration that could be taken. I think, yeah. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that suggestion. I think it's a good one, because in somewhere in the literature there was a discussion about I can't remember offhand where it was, but there's kind of if it was like Victor said, if these two are two different people, this situation could have been averted or not. That kind of one, or Tata could continue as a chairperson and this person can be the CEO, something like that. So there was a reflection on that one. But more important is in terms of positioning the content. I think you have a very important point, Professor, because you mentioned the case. Case is the attraction here. The case actually opens up the scope for the theory like that. But basically, in practice, what we have done is exactly in the same manner, because we looked at the case and the case seems to be interesting, and then we have gone through what are the findings there. So which theory would be more important to explain? So what is the key selling point here? And that is why we looked around, and Silvia, if I am if you can, and we looked around and then find the right kind of theory for it. So we started with the case, although isn't it, Silvia? I think yes.
Yeah, we started with a case. We started with a case, and then we thought the socio-emotional theory was well to explain. However, since our aim was also to then test this dimension, then we had, to be honest, the abduction is really what we did. We start with the case, we found the theory, And then, to test better the theory, we have to go back to the case and see if these 5 dimensions were really present. And then we have to go back from the case to the theory. So this is really what we have done. We started the case, we found the theory, but then we cannot conclude in there because we have to go back to the case and see how to test this dimension to further evolve the theory. So that's why we have presented in this way, because it is really the way we have done it.
Maybe, Professor, a minute on that, 30 seconds on that. Arun and Silvia, normally when you begin with a case or a story, a case normally gives us lessons. What lessons do we pick from the case? That case now, from the lessons, we are ushered into which theories to use in as far as the case is concerned. Theories must sit on the lessons that emanate from the story. That's what you call coherence and breeds consistency of thought in academia. That's the best practice, I think.
Well, sure. I think we can identify several lessons from the study in terms of the issue of control, particularly in terms of the family business, the key role of control, lessons in terms of, we haven't mentioned much about the performance part, but we did a preliminary analysis also to really understand if there was performance going worst, and we couldn't find any evidence. So I think a lesson in here is in particular that when we have businesses that are not the traditional type, financial performance are not the king, but something else it is. And we also, and I think the issue of control is where becomes key when we have these businesses, because they might lose money, but they don't want to lose the control, because if they lose the control, they lose part of the extension of the family where they derive the money for many other things, which are these emotional value, reputation, and so on that we have. So perhaps we have not presented in this way even in the paper, but I think we can identify first the lesson and then link this with the theory.
That's absolutely true, because it's not about the financial performance, it's not about anything else. And then we looked at it, why this has happened. And then some of the decisions took by this guy, Cyrus Mistry, was actually fine, perfectly fine from a business point of view. And the consolidation, amalgamation, and closing down of loss-making enterprises, restructuring, and everything was perfectly fine. But still it happened. So what is the reason there? Yeah. And then we found out that the reasons are mainly with the values and the dimensions we mentioned it. So at that time we had actually a stalemate of few months, because we were not sure about how to move forward and what we can do next. Okay. And then we found out, okay, there must be a theoretical explanation for that. And that is why we started reading this theory. And we found, I think, the relative newness of this theory, and talked to some of the management scholars, and then identified, this may be the useful one. But thank you for your suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah. So just to add another point of the lesson learned, I think it is also the fact that you need to have CEOs that share the values of the business, in the sense that here we had a more Western-oriented shareholder with had all the financial objective in mind, and this was not the right shareholder for a business like Tata. So I think another lesson learned is that, strange enough, they took them 14 months to find the CEO, but they managed to find the one that was not absolutely in line with what are the values of the family. And now I'm not sure what is going to happen with the current one. It seems going well, but what is important, and then probably again a lesson for all the papers that deal about CEO succession, is about the importance of getting a CEO that is in line, particularly in a family business, that is embedded in the culture of the business. Otherwise, that's going to be a disruptor in one moment. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually like this explanation now. I see that you explained that the paper doesn't need to go into the kind of corporate finance angle, which would be based on agency theory, and try to explain it, because it just right at the outset, you should just say, it's not about that. It's not a corporate finance agency theory framework. We are looking for other explanation other than the financial returns or dividend policy. Yeah, and that makes it very clear that you do recognize there are some, studies which look at this in the corporate finance literature, but that's not what the paper is trying to do. It's look for other explanation other than financial, and that's actually great. Yeah. Excellent. Do we have any quick questions, observations, comments? I was hoping to hear some of our colleagues who use kind of semiotics. What they would have done is possibly look at the financial statements, extract the information from them discretely, and the information will then speak. But I suppose that's a different methodology, and it could be that it could also weigh in looking at the behavior of corporate behavior and socio-emotional wealth. Yes, I think you have added one dimension to my own education in terms of understanding the wars, the corporate welfare at the top of the large corporates like Tata, a global conglomerate, and it still has family control. Yeah. So, if there are no, Athena, am I missing a hand up, or not?
No, Victor.
And in the charts, I think I had included something about business groups, but again, business groups takes us so far away into corporate finance, so I will dismiss it outright. All it remains for me to thank you, Silvia and Arun. It was a very exceptional insight, an exceptional case study, and I hope that you can get it published very quickly and share it with the other people who can read this literature. But for us, we really thank you very greatly for this great paper. Thank you indeed. And if you continue this research in this direction, looking at then of course you can share with us a further work in the next academic year or in 2023. For now, let's put our hands together and give a hand of applause to you guys.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity, and we really enjoyed it, and we want to, now we are thinking about the journals who would like this kind of work. And we are discussing on it right now.
So
thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for inviting us. Thank you.
There is even enough work that can do even a research monograph, a book that can shatter the pay the way, because we are all we see is a lot of corporate finance stuff, principal agency theory or agency theory for short, looking at this. But here is a very important dimension, socio-emotional wealth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.